I mean, let's be honest. Every one of us, when we got into sales, hated the rejection shit. We hated that we actually had to go cold outreach people. We hated that we had to be a fucking salesperson, right?
The sales has never been the focus in business school. And but it's such a major part of being in business. You know, when you go to, all the schools are now starting entrepreneurial centers and teaching how to be an entrepreneur, but it's still all this theoretical business stuff on how you run a business. It's economics and theoretical marketing and all that type of stuff. It's not operations. It's not how to sell.
They have not figured out how to get the younger generation to be motivated, productive, contributing in that kind of role. And I think that a lot of it goes back to just the setup of the company in terms of, do they have the right systems and processes in place? Are they hiring the right way? Do they have an onboarding program that allows, people to be successful?
This is going to be a really fun episode. I have met with our guest, Melanie French, we've probably met 4 times now where we've talked. And every time we've met, we've just had this amazing conversation about sales and sales process and strategy. And she is, without a doubt, a badass when it comes to sales. So, Melanie, I am really excited to have you on today.
No pressure.
Welcome to Growth Mode. Yes.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So I brought you on specifically because we were talking about having you be on a podcast, and we were talking about topics, and then it just popped in my head. It's like, we're going to talk about sex and sales, and specifically about men versus women selling. So, when I started selling, a couple of decades ago, there was, sales was still a very male-dominated thing. It was, and fortunately that's changing, and especially in the tech industry, you're starting to see a lot more women selling. So why have women shied away from it up until recently? Why haven't we seen, as many badass sales women as we've seen salesmen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I still think there's a big discrepancy in terms of the number of women that are in sales. And why is that? I think to some degree, women in general, and maybe anyone in general, probably doesn't grow up saying like, man, my dream career is I'm going to be a salesperson.
Yeah, let's clarify that. Nobody does.
No one says that. Yeah,
Period.
That's it.
So I think that plays into it. But then when you think about maybe even the traditional, like, I hate using the word traditional, but when you think of like traditional gender roles and just how folks have been brought up, it's just not like that career path just isn't necessarily one that they think of, but B, even when it's brought up, I think there is a connotation around sales of maybe even aggressiveness. It's probably the first word that comes to mind. Yep. And so a lot of women there are a subset, me being one of them, resonates with that. I'm an assertive, high D on the, DISC profile. So sales is very suited to me, but I would say most females aren't, don't have that. And a lot of guys probably aren't necessarily that way, but they may want to be that way or feel like they need to show that or be that way, just like in life in general. So they tend to be more inclined to have some of those traits either innately or modified or adapted to. And so I think that just makes them more salesy.
But the funny thing is, women in general have some really good superpowers when it comes to sales. There are some things that they're just innately better at than guys normally that makes them really great salespeople. Listening is one of those things.
100%.
So, and that is
what did you say?
Yeah. Welcome to my world. What did you say? I wasn't listening to you. Awesome. But that's a big skill for a salesperson to be able to listen to their client. What else, what makes women better at sales than men in some cases?
I think there's a degree of detail orientedness that comes when it related to like following up in a more creative way versus I think there's a brute force element to it when it comes to the male side of things. So, we're going to, as women in sales, we're not going to approach things exactly the same way. And so that different approach can set us apart when we're talking to prospects. It's a different way of doing things. It's not as in your face or intense. Not that we can't be, but it's a bit more off the cuff, under the table, like coming from the side versus like boom in your face directly at you. And I think that serves us well.
I feel like she's personally attacking me.
No judgment here. No judgment.
It's like, wow, you've met Donnie. Do you think? Go ahead, Donnie.
Yeah, because here's the raw truth. Women can flat out outsell guys for two major reasons, right? Number one, you guys understand this word called empathy. Number two,
I have none of that. I'm so horrible.
Yeah, none. And the second reason I think women can outsell guys is you guys have the ability to actually turn the screws in on somebody and not give a shit. It's literally you guys can women can look at a dude and give him that look and melt him, right? I mean,
is it sexist that Donnie's saying "you guys" when he's talking about you women? I think we need to make him start saying "you gals."
No, it's fine. So it's fine, right? But I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that more women aren't in the sales game. Like they should be in dominating this damn field. And I mean, let's be honest. Every one of us, when we got into sales, hated the rejection shit. We hated that we actually had to go cold outreach people. We hated that we had to be a fucking salesperson, right? And so I almost says a lot more about women of today that they're not getting into the game when they could actually outperform most of the guys that are in the game.
I would agree with that. I think you also then you throw in the whole like millennial, Gen X, Gen Y, whatever the new
alphabet
version
of the generations.
Yeah, whatever they are now. I don't know. I'm a millennial, but whoever comes after that, I think there's this whole like messed up storyline around, either people don't want to work or they're like not motivated the same or any of those, whatever the little stories are that go around that everybody's, spitballing about. I think those things tie into it as well. And so is it true? I don't know. I think there's plenty of people that are both male and female that are motivated, really good at what they do, and are successful.
Right.
But I do think that there's part of that storyline that's told around those younger generations does feed into kind of the lack of interest and or pursuit of a sales career for whatever reason.
Well, what's really surprising then, as I'm thinking through this in real time, is sales is so evolved from when Kevin and I grew up in the sales game, when there was no internet, there was no cell phones really, and you had to do this old school thing. And you actually had to go sell. Nowadays, there's so much more of this social influence that I don't want to say it's easier to sell now, but
I think it's harder.
Oh, I don't at all. I actually think, I'll flat out say, I think it's easier to sell now than it used to be back in the day, because now I can go on social media, I can get consistent, put out content, build a following, get people that are into my message, and now I can go almost, I don't want to say I'm an influencer by any stretch of the imagination, but I can go that more influencer style social selling route, and that is 10 times easier than picking up the damn phone and doing cold calls.
To some degree, but I do think the world has changed like so much that people rely on that so heavily that they can't even use the stuff that's more old school. Like they don't know how or they won't. And
I agree with.
I think it's effective and it can work. I mean, obviously every industry, every business can be slightly different. I'm a fan of the education based content, like that type of, I'll call that marketing, not necessarily selling, but I think that piece is helpful, but people want to rely solely on that. And they don't have the skill set in any of the other kind of toolbox or the other tools in the toolbox. Like they just can't or won't because it requires speaking to someone or picking up the phone, God forbid. Like,
Right.
oh my God.
That's a great point. Great point.
You
Yeah,
know,
well-
so it almost avoids the rejection because there is no, like, oh, I'm hiding behind my screen and I've got my social media and I've got my keyboard warriors out there just doing their thing. And not that doesn't work, yes, and I'm a believer in that, but I do think that we miss a lot because we don't interact in a face-to-face real manner.
Well, I think when you compare using the social media now as your prospecting tool versus how we would have done it back when we were getting the sales game with the reach outs and cold calls, there was noise for both, but it was different. So when I was prospecting at Nextel and I was, doing my reach outs and my cold calls because social media wasn't a thing yet, there was every other business to business wireless rep was doing the same thing. So I would have clients that I would get meetings with. They're like, you are the third Nextel rep who's called me this week. And so there's that noise. And the same is true with social media. There is just as much noise now on social media for people who are trying to push, whatever their product or service is as there was with the telemarketing before. So, but it's just a different medium. So I think what Donnie's saying is the ability to be able to do multiple ones is what's going to be able to set you apart now in the sales game.
That's the whole point is I think us a little bit older generation have got this, ooh, shit, we got a new tool to play with when it comes to selling. So we're still doing the old school tactics. We just added on the social media game and it gave us another lever to pull as far as our business development, aka marketing, prospecting, behaviors as we're out there. But that's a valid point, Melanie. I hadn't thought about the lack of interaction and actually having to talk to people because I look at my nieces and nephews and they can barely carry on a damn conversation. Yeah. So how do we get more of them in the game?
So before we ask a question, because that's really good, I want to talk about, because we're talking about toys and lack of interaction. Let's talk about ChatGPT for a bit, and how is that going to mess with the sales piece? And is it going to be different for a woman salesperson than how a guy salesperson would use it? Do you think there's going to be is there a line between the sexes for AI and the tools?
I think the AI thing is cool. And so like just touching real quickly on like the thing over like AI overall and ChatGPT overall, there's this, I think everyone is flocking to it in general. Like everyone's like, oh, this cool, neat new toy. How are we going to use it? And when you like, even from a content marketing perspective, if everybody's dumping their stuff into ChatGPT and having it spit out whatever that they post online, the people that are actually creating their own stuff and are going to stand out. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of like are we the social media people or are we picking up the phone? It's kind of a similar conundrum there. So I think that, well, is it cool? Yeah. Is it going to replace salespeople in general? No. I don't buy that for a second. I think that there's a lot of cool, unique things, and people are freaking out, of course, about what is AI going to do to my job and all this stuff. I think it's a tool, but it still requires, like, in general, people want to talk to people and they want to have real conversations or, well, social media. I don't know what, from that standpoint, but they really, like, in order to sell effectively, especially when it comes to like a more highly considered purchase, they're going to like, ChatGPT isn't going to sell them that. Like, they want to talk to somebody who knows, like really knows, not some bot that is cool. I mean, so that piece aside, I don't know, women, and so I'm not a huge ChatGPT fan at this point. I mean, I
couldn't
think
they have made an easier fucking name to say? I mean, it's just to kind of say ChatGPT, blah, blah, blah,
like
right?
2 minutes. So, yeah, I think so for women, and I don't know, I've never thought about that. Women versus men. I think, this is going to sound terrible. I think guys may take the easier road and want to try to use ChatGPT.
100% agree.
I think women maybe are going to think more critically about it, and maybe say, maybe this isn't the way that I should approach it, or maybe I shouldn't use it for this. something along those lines. I don't know.
So you're saying that women are more,
yeah,
women are more ethical than guys? Is that where we're going?
I don't know that it's an ethics conversation.
Oh, I'll say that. I'll say it so you don't get in trouble.
Blur the line. You guys blur the line a little more.
A lot more.
I'm a rule follower in general, so I would agree with that to some degree.
That's awesome. Yeah, but I think if properly utilized, ChatGPT is going to do a lot for salespeople. The unfortunate side of it is when we talked to Josh Fetty, it was a great conversation. One point he brought up is like when some new technology comes along that inherently automates a process, in this case, sales, we lose the skill set that the process automated. Mm-hmm. So like when email automation came through, you could all of a sudden plug in all your emails and it would start chunking out all these different emails. People forgot how to do an email sequence. They forgot how to write, those proper emails. So my fear with ChatGPT right now is people are going to be like, all right, give me the 10 sales questions I should ask on a sales call. And then they're going to start, formulating, how should I reply to this RFP in ChatGPT? And you're going to get all these generic answers and all the things they had to manually think through. They're now going to try and put through this automation software, and they're going to lose that skill set that, at some point is going to be a valuable asset.
That's a very interesting take on it. And I think you're 100% right.
Wow. Can we get that segment on loop?
You're 100% right. You're 100% right.
That is going to be his new ringtone. He's going to be able to hear it all day, every time it goes off.
I'm married, dear. Of course not. But all right. So how do we get more women into the sales game? How do we get more of these millennials into the sales game? Because it is a profession that, it's a very lucrative profession too. Outside of being an entrepreneur, it's the most lucrative profession in the damn world. And, it's going to be I don't want to say a lost skill set, but you're going to see a lot of the old codgers and the old ladies that have been in the game for a long time, staying in the game for a long time because they're the only ones that are able to out there go out and sell. So. Yeah,
that's a huge conundrum. Like I work with a couple of clients in the commercial insurance space. And one of the big problems that plagues that industry overall is they're all very small agencies. And when they try these are more independent type agencies, not like your State Farm type stuff, but they struggle to hire like new hires that are, I'll call it, young in their careers or right out of college, like, entry level type people. And so they have all of these old timer people that have been in the industry, do everything kind of the old school way. And they have not figured out how to get the younger generation to be motivated, productive, contributing in that kind of role. And I think that a lot of it goes back to just the setup of the company in terms of, do they have the right systems and processes in place? Are they hiring the right way? Do they have an onboarding program that allows, people to be successful? So I think that's one of the key things, like with even, especially women in sales, like they want to come into, a lot of people want this, but I think it's especially true of women. They want to come into an environment that kind of takes them with open arms and helps them develop and grow through the process as they, grow in their career. And I think a lot of companies, their sales onboarding, their sales training, like none of that is well flushed out. And it's like, hey, good luck. It's still a lot of organizations operate and it's like, hey, welcome aboard. Good luck. Like, here's your computer, here's your phone. Yep. Figure it out. And I think that hurts entirely the younger generation overarchingly. And so they go to a chat GPT to help them shortcut or figure it out. May or may not work for them. The time will tell. But I think women in general tend to look for a more homely environment. I hate that word, but I guess they want more of that environment that's like, hey, how are you going to help me be successful? And because there's a lot of other positions and jobs out there that have that built around it, but for whatever reason, sales kind of lives in like, I don't know, the 19th century sometimes.
I agree. God, I agree.
So there's a lot of good resources and tools out there, but companies are still operating like it's 40 years ago sometimes. And it's like, that is not going to cut it when it comes to recruiting the younger generation. Like, they're looking for something different. And so I think that definitely ties into, the male female piece, but overarchingly as well.
For sure. I mean, I remember when I got hired on in one of my first really big sales jobs, they literally handed me a desk and a computer and said, there you go. I had no training, no coaching, no mentoring, no anything. And even back then, thinking back then, if I just had one person who would have sat me down and said, okay, here's how you find prospects.
Yeah, do X, Y, and Z.
Right. And gave me a step-by-step process. I'm sure I would have only used the process for a little while because that's just how I'm wired. But it would at least given me a direction. And I agree with you. If these companies today aren't taking the time to build out a real onboarding process, a real sales process, they're going to lose because, we've worked with a couple of younger people and, we are recording videos and we're doing SOPs and, we're documenting along the way. So there's extra tools to allow them to have those resources versus going, hey, figure it out the old school way, like what we grew up with.
Well, even with, what we just taught in Success Champion Networking with our Becoming a Champion on how to do reach outs on LinkedIn. What that process looks like and how to do it so that you aren't that slimy salesperson.
Wait, you don't want to buy my stuff?
Some of them that I get on LinkedIn, I'm like, how did someone convince you that this is actually a good way to sell?
This is why we created Pitch Slap on the Monday morning. We do a Monday morning live show in our community, and we have a segment called Pitch Slap where we read off all these horrible pitches. It's so awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad ones.
Oh, horrible. So all these people, these young and women, guys, I don't care. I'm really more concerned overall about the younger generation and getting them engaged. What are some of the things specifically a business or a small business owner should do to get more people, even the younger generation, to not even lean in just from sales, but lean in overall?
So I think the college recruiting market is huge in terms of getting engaged with local universities, especially the ones that have sales and marketing type programs. There's a lot of great programs out there, and becoming active in terms of, that can mean a lot of things. Some of the universities have different clubs that companies can be a part of, classes even, depending on, how they structure their courses and all of that. But those are great opportunities from a recruiting standpoint to get involved and get your exposure to get good talent, right, kind of out of the gate, and build those relationships. But it also, you can begin to develop, some onboarding and training programs around, like, how do you bring someone out of college, right, who, let's be honest, basically doesn't know jack shit about the business world or life, right. And like, so they in their mind, they come out thinking like, oh, I'm a recent college grad. Well, so is everybody else that I talk to when I'm interviewing. So how can we, when they're speaking to a company, like, what types of things they want to know, like, what do you have in place? Like, how do I know that if I take a job here that, like, how do you measure success? Do you have that defined? Do you have a progression that someone, can go through to learn the industry, to learn your company, to learn whatever skills, from a sales perspective that are needed in order to be successful? Because ultimately that whole endeavor, like the whole endeavor of hiring, is expensive, right? It's expensive whether they last, and they're expensive whether they don't last. It's probably more expensive if they don't last. So when business owners don't always think about it like that, but they just think, oh, like, I paid somebody their $40,000 base salary. They didn't make it. Okay. Like, peace out. I'll get rid of them and hire someone else. But the reality of that is they lost 3, 6, 9, 12 months of sales potentially. Yep. They lost potentially morale because people around them in the organization don't want to like turnover sucks, right? Like, why is everybody getting fired or why is everybody leaving? So organizationally, having a lot of those systems, processes, training on the front end, like if you want to hire people entry level, if you don't have that stuff in place, you're going to have a lot of turnover. And it can be a differentiator when you're attracting people as well. So if you're looking to hire people that are, bought into whatever your mission and vision is as a company, and you are looking for people to last, it's hard to do.
This is why I'm fascinated with the next 10 years. And it'll come right back to you,
it's
Kevin.
It's going to be interesting.
Because, all these big companies, they can't hire. They can't bring these people on. They don't know how to train them. They don't know how to work with them. And, now you've got so many entrepreneurs in the space that are now working remote that I have a computer, I have social media, I can create a company, so these next 10 years are going to be really, really, really fascinating. But Kevin, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. My comment was going to be, it's the sales has never been the focus in business school. Mm. And but it's such a major part of being in business. When you go to, all the schools are now starting entrepreneurial centers and teaching how to be an entrepreneur, but it's still all this theoretical business stuff on how you run a business. It's economics and theoretical marketing and all that type of stuff. It's not operations. It's not how to sell. If you got a business degree, when I was in college, if you got a business degree, there was not a sales 101 class. There was nothing where they taught you about the whole concept of how to sell, the psychological pieces, the process, any of that type of stuff. So I think, that if we're able to make that shift where people understand that, sales is a big part of business. And that's something that we teach when we're working with people that are going through that startup phase of that, hey, your number one role as the entrepreneur, as a business owner is sales. And getting people to understand that is, if you can learn how to sell, you're going to learn so much about business. Now you have that basis to be able to go and be entrepreneurial and go do other things because you understand the basic skill of business, which is selling a product.
Absolutely. Question for you guys. Donnie, you touched on the remote work type thing. Mm-hmm. Do you think that, I think remote work is here to stay, but do you think that it hurts or helps like recent college grad or entry level type people coming into the workforce?
I've been seriously trying to think through for me, how would remote working when I was a lot younger affected how I sold? And I really think it would. And the reason being is I needed to get my teeth kicked in a real world situation. I needed to go fuck up a lot of sales calls, right? I needed to go through those experiences. And I don't think I would have gotten those same experiences if I was sitting behind my computer trying to do 100% sales that way. And I attribute most success from sales, most success in running a business from all the fuck ups and learning from those moments when everything, breaks and you go, okay, what did I screw up there? You adjust and you go again. And I don't know that I would have gotten the same level of that type of experience. Now, with that said, I know for a fact remote's 100% here to stay. Which I don't have the answer to right now is how do you teach a new remote sales team to do both? Go be in person and virtual. What's the behaviors and you put behind that so they can be successful? That'd be a fascinating thing to go figure out. And the person who does is going to make a lot of damn money.
What do you think, Kevin?
Oh, it is a completely different way to learn sales because one of the benefits of being in the bullpen in a sales organization was that you had people there that could answer questions. You could literally call across the cubicle. There was no crawling across the cubicle. You're calling across the cubicle. Yeah, all different. Yeah. You could literally call across your little cubicle wall and say, hey, all right, so how are you doing this? and you can get that immediate feedback. And, and Donnie and I do it sometimes. We did it yesterday where we just sit on Zoom and we're working. We literally, for a while, we weren't talking, but we were still on Zoom. So we had that concept of the office cubicle world where we could interact and talk and ask questions. But you don't have that now if you're doing 100% sales from home. And, people are like now mad because some companies are saying, yeah, you got to come into the office on like 2 days a week. Well, and it's probably they're making those rules because they're seeing that their employees aren't actually engaging with each other as much as they used to. And they're losing some of that collaboration piece. Everyone says, oh, you can totally collaborate, you can get Slack, but it's not the same. And it's just like we're telling our networking groups in SCN that, hey, yes, you are an online networking group, but you still have to have the in-person events. You still got to do the thing where you can go up and shake someone's hand and actually, give them a hug if you're that person, and have that type of interaction. You can't just be 100% virtual. So, I think they're missing out on a lot if you try to have it all virtual, especially for someone who's never sold before. You got to have that support structure where they feel comfortable just saying, okay, what's going on? You probably can answer because I've been hearing you do all the same calls I'm doing. And you're saying, whoo, I got an appointment where I'm saying, crap, another one hung up on me.
I think women are going to be more affected by the remote work than men.
How so?
I think I think just the nature of how women are, like in terms of maybe more sociable, but just like personality wise, I think putting someone behind a computer screen, I think the deficits that come from that as a younger female in sales is going to be a much, much greater deficit than from a guy's perspective.
Well, it's interesting because there is definitely a social aspect to women and how they like to work. On one of my deployments, they built a well. They updated the water supply for a village, and so previously the women were walking to this well, collecting all their water, and then coming back. And they built out this new water supply process for them, which basically gave them running water, and no one used it. The women still came to the well to collect water because it was their chance to socialize and be with all the other women in the area. And there's other concepts where I was looking at how, in some areas where like bread, all the women would bring their bread to one baker who had all the really nice stoves, and he would break their bread for them. They'd cook it, they'd make into the loaves or whatnot, but he would bake it, and that was their socializing time. So I think that socialization piece is I think you're onto something with that being a really big part for how women operate and become more successful in sales.
How do companies embrace that in a half virtual world? I mean, do you bring a open work office working sessions where people can, maybe cold call, everybody's sharing Zooms, or they're doing reach outs and everybody's on the Zooms. My question also in those dynamics, you're still going to have personality conflicts. I mean, let's be honest, two guys with high egos shouldn't be in the same room at the same time because they're either going to feed off each other or beat the shit out of each other, right? The same thing with women. A lot of times, high-powered women will not play well together, because the claws come out. And so, you got to wrestle that dynamic. So Melanie, I'm really curious, how the hell do companies embrace, especially the younger generation of females, if there is that social aspect? That's a fascinating thing to think through.
First off, there's an element of intentionality. So everyone, like a lot of companies say, oh, we want to be X or we want to do Y. And then they kind of just leave it at that and assume that, it'll be fine. It'll work itself out. And when it comes to the remote piece, if there's not a level of intentionality about whatever it is we're trying to accomplish and putting steps in place to actively work on that, it's just going to fall flat on its face. So that piece of just saying you want to do it is a start, but the intentionality is really where it comes, the rubber meets the road in terms of, are we going to actually be able to be successful? And so I've seen there's an element of like, I'm a fan of hybrid, especially for young professionals. Personally, I work 100% remote now, and I love it. I also worked in an office for 5 days a week for 15 years. So, and I think that had a huge impact on success and my ability to learn and grow and get where I am today. So, as a young person coming out, I would want to know that the organization I go to work for has some sort of intentional plan around that component of things. So that could look like team building type things, like you talked about virtually. Some of it's like intentional one-on-one conversations with, I'll call it a talk track or a certain set of questions, like checking in terms of how someone is doing, more than just checking in. But it's an intentional set of, we're going to have this meeting every 90 days and we're going to talk about these things. And it's an open forum from a development perspective. So
wait, are you saying corporations actually got to give a shit?
Yeah.
I mean, I was playing it all through my head.
Good ones do.
Right,
there are some great companies out there that do a great job and have a lot of these things figured out. And there's also quite a few that suck. So, and those are the ones that chew people up and spit them out. And nobody wants to work there. And a lot of people hear about experiences in those realms potentially from a sales perspective and think, oh man, I don't want any part of that. So I think that's giving it a bad name as well.
I wonder if anybody's done a study on men-led companies versus female-led companies and which ones give a shit more. I know there's a better way of phrasing that.
100% women.
Right. Well, and then the second part of that, I wonder if anybody's done a study on a salesperson who built a company versus a non-salesperson and how that fits a culture, because a traditional gregarious dude that's built his company usually has this egocentric style of brand, right? And there's this air of egoness throughout the company. I don't know how else to say that. And I wonder if somebody who's non-sales type, what their culture tends to look like and how that shapes through companies, because I think that's really going to change up the dynamics of what it looks like for new people coming into the company.
Yeah, sales versus operational.
Yeah. Because I know a couple of guys that are these over the top ego dudes that come from the sales game, and you walk into their office and it's like walking into the sales pit, like the old school, we're going to freaking get after it, phone decks, and it's game on at that point.
Cardone style.
Yes.
Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross.
Right. And dude, I'm telling you, that style of selling is dying daily, which is awesome. Which I absolutely love. But I think because for so long that style of environment was the way to do business, I don't know that companies know how to get away from it. Flip side of that, and then I have a question. You got guys like Gary Vee who's coming out and saying happiness and love, but that motherfucker's a dick. I mean, at the end of the day, that guy is over the top. He's loud. He's one of those, going to win at all costs guys. And, go look at his Glassdoor reviews and they'll tell you a lot. Nothing against the guy,
Elon Musk.
Exactly right. Right. They're both doing something right if you look at it from just an economic standpoint, right? Morally, I can't say I agree with everything they do, right? But, so I'm curious if a company's been long in the tooth, like they've been around for a while, how do they make such a massive shift to get away from this factory style worker environment where you're a robot employee that just does one thing all day, that's your job, to this collaboration environment where they're embracing learning, they're embracing culture, and they're trying to transform everything around? How do they do that?
Well, it starts at the top. So if the top's not bought in, you're kind of screwed. You can, as a department leader, and depending on the size of the organization, you can try to make some strides. But at the end of the day, you're always going to be limited by, you're going to tap out at wherever that line is for the people higher than you, or some variation of that. So I think, there are good, authentic leaders that lead companies that buy into that more new age and evolved way of doing business, selling, all of those things. And so how do you change? I mean, the leader of the organization has to decide that that's how they want it to be. I mean, intentionality. If they don't decide that that's the kind of company they want to be, they're just going to be stuck where they're at. Change is hard. And so the ability to change is also, definitely linked to, can that person at the top make a change, or will they?
Yeah, and that's the key part, I think, for business in general. If you want to grow and scale a business, you need to be willing to look at things that are different, that do not work the way you've always done it in the past. That can't be the excuse anymore. Well, that's how we've always done it. That's how I sold when I was a young whippersnapper salesperson. So you should do it that way too. You need to be willing to explore. All right, so let's look at that. How do we test it? How do we break it and see what it actually does and what we like and what we don't like about it? And that's the trait of a good business owner, in general, let alone a good sales leader. I had, when I was at Nextel, we transitioned from a really great sales leader, a sales manager who had sold solution sales and understood the industry really well, to someone who his experience in selling before coming to Nextel was selling tickets for a sports team. Very transactional. Now he was running a high performing business team, and his idea of how he managed it was, we need to do daily call-ins at 5 and you got to report on all your activity for the day. I'm like, no, that's not happening, because I'm at 150% of quota. I don't need you micromanaging me. And, and he wasn't open to the change. So I left. I'm like, screw it. I can sell the same product for someone else. Literally, I can sell Nextel for a partner. So, and I did. And I went and worked for my old sales manager at the partner that he was now an owner of. So, but that's the thing. You have to be willing to make the trial. You need to try things different. You need to be listening to people who have different experiences and can say, well, here's how here's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if, as I said, I keep going back to it, and it keeps running through my head. These next 10 years are going to be so fucking fascinating. I'm really excited to see how this all plays out with the younger generation and the seasoned, veterans that have left corporate America and have started their own things. I think you're going to see a resurgent come back around where they're going to go back and find a job, because building your own business is tough as shit. And I don't think they're ready for that. So I think that's going to be.
Can't sell.
Yeah. That's it.
100%. The number one determiner, there's some luck involved and obviously some relationships, but in general, if you can't sell, you're not going to be successful in a entrepreneurial type business.
But Melanie, most people, they're like, I just want to do my thing. I just want to serve people. I just want to help people. Why do I have to go sell?
Or they think of selling as this 4-letter word. Like, it's not a 4-letter word. It's just hey, let's have a conversation. Here's what I do. Here's how I help. Or is this something that's relevant in your world? Let's talk about that. Is there a good fit or not? Okay.
We hear this.
It's just a conversation.
Yeah, we hear this from business owners all the time, and it drives me and Donnie completely nuts. They think if they need to sell more, they just need more marketing. We need more marketing stuff. Well, it's part of it, but they think that's actually what's going to sell the product. They think, well, I just need more marketing and my revenue will go up. Well, the marketing, if you're doing it right, is going to get more people in your pipeline. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sell your service.
Yeah, especially if you're selling something higher ticket.
Yeah, exactly. So, higher ticket. And that was my issue when I started Time on Target, when I did my big pivot into the consulting role. I was doing all the CEO stuff, and, I was creating a website and creating the marketing things and pricing pages and all kinds of really cool stuff that didn't actually sell my product. You know, that there was a whole, I'll build this website and then I'll sell stuff. No, that's not how this works. Trust me, been there, done that. So, you know, it's getting your head around that you have to go sell stuff. You need to talk to people is, you know, so key.
Which is what also gets people stuck too in today's world, because we all want to be behind our computers, and remotely working from home makes it difficult to get comfortable doing those things because you're not in front of people enough. You're not having those conversations on a regular basis.
Yep.
Hey, I like the fact that I can still be sitting here in my pajama bottoms and run 3 companies. So, you know, I'm going to stay remote for a long
I love
time.
it. I'm 100. Yeah, I'm all about the remote. I work remotely completely.
Yeah, it's so awesome. So, Melanie, we could probably go on and on and on and on and on for quite a while about this stuff. You get us talking about sales, and we were not likely to shut up for sure. One question I want you to speak on really quick, and then we'll wrap this up, is tell me a little bit. I see now I caught it. Sure, first she couldn't say Chat GPT. Kevin couldn't crawl over the cubicles. Now I'm just blah, 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 blah. Fucking hell. Tell me a little bit or talk to me about Hope Island. I saw it in one of your posts on LinkedIn, and I want to know more.
All right. So Hope Island is the place that salespeople go believing that a deal is still viable, valid, going to close, however you want to describe it. So it's a place where a lot of salespeople live because they don't ask questions. They don't have next established steps. But somehow that deal is miraculously going to close by end of the month, end of the quarter, whatever it is. So that's the general premise of what Hope Island is. What other questions do you have on it?
Well, I knew what it was. I just wanted to hear you explain because it was a funny damn post of yours that I read on there, and I really enjoyed shit of it. You know, we used to call it hopium.
I like that phrase. I might steal that.
Yeah, feel free. It's not mine originally. I stole it off somebody. You know, but it's that same idea. I think people get we've always called happy ears. They start hearing what's not actually being said, but they're like, we talked to a client yesterday, and she's like, I think I just landed this really, really large deal. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. And they're like, well, he said, give him a couple weeks and get back to him. Then he might possibly maybe do something. I'm like, Jesus Christ, here we go.
That's going nowhere.
How do people keep themselves from getting caught in Hope Island?
Best question that I ask from a sales leadership perspective is, what's the next step? So if you can't tell me what your actual next step is in a pretty specific way, you're probably on Hope Island. And that, to me, that means usually it's a time and date on the calendar for a next meeting, whatever that is, whatever's going to happen in that meeting. So if a prospect isn't willing to commit to a future date and time, kind of on the spot, probably there's some red flags there. There's something they're not telling you. There's something you haven't uncovered, you haven't asked, whatever it is. But clear next step and
I
date on the calendar.
You know, one thing back when I was doing sales training that I always tell, the presidents of companies, sales managers, I'm like, if that salesperson comes back and they are excited and they're telling you all about the sales call and all the things, first, be worrisome, right? But then ask them all the questions. What's the next steps? What's going on? What's there? If they come back and they kind of just go a straight line to their desk and sit down, they bombed the sales call. Go out and ask any question that's not about that sales call. Ask them about another job that's going through the shop. Ask them about anything to allow them to, because they're so deflated at that moment because they blew a sales call. Give them 2 seconds to breathe and then go, all right, what could you have done better? And let them come to you versus browbeating the shit out of them. And it works really, really, really well.
I like that too.
It's been a lot of fun. Well, my dear, it has been a blast having you on here. It's awesome to get to know you. Hopefully we get to see you here in a couple weeks in Cincinnati when Kevin and I fly in for that. So how do people get in touch with you? They absolutely should reach out to you. You know your shit. And I'm very, very impressed with such a young gal that's kicking ass as much as you are. So good on you. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, best way is LinkedIn. You can find me, Melanie French. French Sales Solutions is my company, and you should be able to pull me up using either of those. But would love to interact with you on there. I post several times a week with good stuff, funny stuff, stories, tips, tricks, all those things. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. It was great.
Yeah, I was so glad you came on.